Palantir. Palantir is the main subject of today's video. Yes, it's two-piece here today. First one I want to react to, Alex Karp, Palantir CEO, speaking about several different subjects. I've been wanting to do this the last couple days as a recent interview here. Some very important things he said that I want to go ahead and go through in this video here today and kind of share my opinions and perspectives on, okay? Once we get through that, we're going to go ahead and react to this one from 8 hours ago, 8 hours ago, Tom Lee, speaking about several different opinions on the market, what stocks to own, all those sorts of things, okay? Appreciate y'all joining me as always. Looking forward to getting into this one. All I ask in return, make sure you guys hit that like button for me. Appreciate y'all. And make sure you're subscribed here to the channel. 45,800 plus subscribers strong. So appreciate each and every one of you for being here. Looks like a good day for Palantir stock out there. So congrats all Palantir shareholders. It's been a really good last, to be quite frank, nearly 2 years at this point in time in regards to Palantir stock. Let's get into this one.
Man's interview here at AIPCon. This is the company's customer conference. Alex, thanks for taking the time to chat.
Very happy to be here.
So today there's going to be more than 250 of your customers, and they're going to be here, Alex, talking about AIP. This is your flagship AI platform.
By the way, I thought this was a really important interview from the stock perspective, because there's a lot of things that are good questions that Josh Lipton asked here to really explain to a lot of folks on what Palantir is actually up to with their business model and why these things matter.
Alex, for many viewers who aren't as familiar, what is AIP? How does it work, and how are businesses leveraging it right now?
I think what everybody watching this is familiar with is you have a
Alex Karp, what did you grow to be 7 feet tall? Holy smokes, it's a jolly green giant. Oh my gosh.
High cycle around large language models. And then when you try to use them in your enterprise, you find out that it's more like self-flagellation and it's expensive with no output. And what we learned in the context of warfighting primarily, but also across the 20 years of building software infrastructure, where how do you manage an emergent natural resource called large language models in a way where you actually get value, meaning you can transform your enterprise, you can change the margins, you can turn non-technical people into technical people. On the battlefield, you can do things that would have otherwise cost billions of dollars for millions of dollars, meaning being very precise in how you allocate troops, being precise in how you target people. There's a fundamental fallacy around large language models. People could conflate actual data of an enterprise, which is structured and can be taken apart and understood, with a large language model, which is much more like an emergent property, something that is can be modeled, used, but you need precision. And all the value in the market is going to go to chips and what we call ontology. And we have this ontology, and the ontology will allow you to take a large language model and use it, refine it, and you then impose it on your enterprise, in the logic of your enterprise, in the security model of your enterprise. And what does that mean for the 70 people are here presenting, talking about why they're using it, how they're using it. You got to remember, we started selling this product just over a year ago. We started with the claim that we knew a lot about the precursors of large language models and the general. I
thought that was big right there alone. Think about it. It's talking about starting the product a year ago. Like, that's insane, right? My gosh, you think about the opportunity over the next 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. Jeez.
Buying models is going to be essentially self-pleasuring for an enterprise at the cost of the enterprise. And no one believed us. And now you see 70 people saying, hey, we're using this for construction. We're using it for hospitals. The people who are not speaking, but we're using it on the battlefield. We're using it to compress margins. We're using it to build enterprises that we're only able to build in Asia and America. We're making engineers better engineers. We're making people who are not engineers into engineers using our ontology and a large language model. And this works very, very quickly, and it is substantially changing the health and vitality of every business here. And as opposed to the alternative, which is that you buy some large language model, you party with it basically, and the next day you have a hangover. And again, for people just looking at this, what does it mean for Palantir? It means we are sitting on the only thing that actually creates quantifiable transformational value in an enterprise. Yes, it is not understood well because everybody understands the problem incorrectly. Yes, it is going to transform America, and our clients are leading the way. And by the way, it's like to actually show things that are not understood, you have to actually show them. The whole purpose of this conference is, I can tell you how an ontology works. It's actually quite simple. You have the logic of the business, including the security logic of the business, and you have something that approximates new knowledge in a new form called a large language model. And it allows you to take the value of the new form, the raw resource of a large language model, largely powered by chips, and put it into a precise organization in the logic of the business. I can tell you that. Or I can show you 70 businesses saying, my business is stronger, healthier, and much better than any other business in my sector.
And so what is...
And that right there is huge. Huge, 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 okay? And I think that's why Palantir having these customers talk about why Palantir's products are so great, whether it be AIP, Foundry, right? It's the biggest. It's the biggest. It's the best thing that could happen. You're talking about actual CEOs telling the stories, actual executives of these companies telling stories about how Palantir, and there were so many different use cases. If you watch that event, it was incredible how many different use cases those companies went through. And you really start to learn that Palantir is a product for every industry. It truly is. And you can't say that too often about too many products that you're like, oh, this is actually a great product for every industry. For Palantir and what they've got, honestly, there's no doubt in my mind that product can be used in any large organization, in any business, really in the world. There's no doubt in my mind at this point in time that I've just seen way too many of these executives of these companies go on to talk about Palantir's products and how it's changed it for the better.
For investors listening, Alex, how would you characterize what is commercial demand like right now for AIP?
The way I would explain it to my most important investors, which are individual investors, there's two parts of the market that are creating value people will pay for: chips and ontology. And you understand the chip side now, and now you're going to understand ontology. And what does that mean for your business? It means you can actually use this raw resource and process it into something that actually works. And if you want to see exactly how, watch the people presenting. You're going to see people in construction using it to build buildings quicker, cheaper, more accurately. You're going to see people in the hospital industry saying, how could I possibly ever distribute my patients ethically, fairly, and commercially relevantly? How could I distribute resources across? How can I manage my company as not abstract units, but as a portfolio? These things are happening within days.
What I'm interested in, Alex, is because you can talk, a lot of CEOs will say, and they'll say on Yahoo Finance, they're interested in AI, but actually they're not willing to pull the trigger yet because they have these questions about privacy, security, vendors. But you're saying we're crushing it, we're closing AIP business.
What I would tell any of them is,
how are you doing it?
Well, there's a technical answer, which I gave you the precursor of. But again, do you want to know how we're doing it, or do you want to enjoy it being done?
Both, really.
Great. Well, first you want to see it works. Yeah. Like the central issue, I think, we have hundreds and hundreds of CEOs. And by the way, the thing about the 70 people here presenting is, they're presenting to other people. I'm not paying them to present. The reason they're presenting is they're like, wow, I didn't really believe this could work, and now it's working really well. So the most important thing, by the way, for a normal user, someone who's going to pay, is, does it work? Then the second question is, how does it work? Does it scale? What is the commercial model? You really have to establish it works. I would stand by the thing that in this case is, people think of large language models as the value in of itself. What they're going to find is the large language model is much more like a chemistry experiment, the outgrowth of which is something that is useful when refined. And the refinement of that for your enterprise happens in what we call our ontology, which is where we impose the logic of your business on the large language model in the security and intellectual logic of your business. And this is transformative. And what it means for investors and others is there is value in this market. You can identify where the value is very easily. Are people paying for it? Will they pay for it? And there's a Pareto optimality to a lot of this stuff. And that Pareto optimality happens when people say, oh, I am actually getting value. And that's why people are here.
Let me ask you, I want to broaden the conversation because you kind of suggested this. Just get your take on the moment we're in, because there's some, Alex, you've heard who say, listen, this is a historic moment. Internet, mobile, and now AI. NVIDIA's Jensen Huang said the next industrial revolution has begun. Do you agree with that? You agree with Jensen?
I think you're going to have very divergent. For some people, this is a next generation. And for others who think they're doing very similar things, it's going to fail.
Who defines the winners? Who will be the winners?
Well, come talk to our 70 customers. They think they're winning. And it's like, look, it's a lot of this goes back to basic ideas of how you build things. Why you got to talk to people who are getting value and ask them, how are you getting value? Why are you getting value? Are you paying more or less for that value than you think you should? And that's exactly what you're going to see today. You're going to see people saying, I'm getting a lot of value. It went much quicker than I thought. I'm outstripping what I thought I could do. I'm much better than the people. It happened efficiently, and I don't think they'll say this, but I'm paying less than I think I should, and that's why I'm very happy about it.
Let me get your take, too. When we talk about AI, we got to talk geopolitics. I'm very curious to get your answer to this question. Who is in pole position, U.S. or China?
Well, we have a very different problem in the U.S. than any other country in the world. We are in pole position, but we obviously have to move much, much quicker. You see on the battlefield, and again, without mentioning where these things are used, exactly what I'm talking about, large language model plus ontology can be wielded as a very deadly weapon and create enormous efficiencies for especially small armies against large armies. We have to be myopically focused in this culture of we are in a pre-war situation with our adversaries, and we can no longer afford theologies about what works on the back.
Okay, that's a big statement right there. He just described this as a pre-war, which kind of is another way of saying that he still thinks war's coming, right? It's like you wouldn't call, let's say we're about to watch a football game, we're saying we're watching the pregame, right? You remember there's no game, there's a game right after, right? We're watching the pregame. So if you say we're pre-war, you're basically saying that's just a fancy way of saying like war is coming, right? So I think that's a big statement from Karp there, right? A man that knows quite a bit.
It can be wielded as a very deadly weapon and create enormous efficiencies for especially small armies against large armies. We have to be myopically focused in this culture of we are in a pre-war situation with our adversaries, and we can no longer afford theologies about what works on the battlefield. We have to go very deep and look at what's happening on battlefields and do a diagnostic of, it's much less critical, but it's the same thing that businesses have to do. What is working, what is not a theological thing of what would I like to believe is working. And what works on the battlefield, where our central advantage is, as the United States of America, the leader of the West and the most important country in the world, is technology, venture-backed companies, and especially software and software-driven weapon systems. And how do you get the software to control the hardware so that we can get out of the business of trying to compete with people who are better at hardware and get into the business of producing something they do not produce as well, comes down to execution. The problem we have in the West actually is Pareto optimality. The products that actually scare our enemies are just not products that employ millions of people. But they still are deadly. There are software-driven hardware systems moving to software-driven autonomous hardware systems. One of the biggest lessons of war, and one of the reasons this is so crazy valuable, is the Russians and all of our adversaries have now learned the value of electronic warfare. By the way, again, these things are exactly isomorphic to commercial. You have enormous new headwinds. Your competition has developed something that renders your product strategy irrelevant. You have to rebuild it with a new playbook. This is exactly what happens on the battlefield. You cannot use a normal missile or normal tank on the battlefield anymore because the electronic warfare allows you to suppress the GPS signal. And that means these things have to be controlled with software to go around, map where the suppression happens, and then in the final mile at some point autonomously. Completely different ways of doing AI, completely different new ways of doing it, all of which are an advantage to America if we implement. Just like in American industry, we have something called a chip industry that is the world's leading in this area, or at least the final product. And we have something called software ontology, which actually makes all of this crazy valuable. Do you implement it? Do you go talk to people who are doing it? Or do you read the PowerPoint written by someone who has no skin in the game? and the answer to that determines whether America and the West, which I view as a superior way of living because it's fairer, better, meritocratic, leads to free speech, allows for wealth creation. Does that culture actually dominate and win? And we, by the way, have to get out of the apologizing for our culture thing. It's like we are a better way of living, and we have to be willing to fight for it. On the economic front, with growth, that's why this conference is so important. We need growth. What makes America different than our adversaries right now is not just weapon system. We have growth. Where's that growth coming from? Technology. What is that technology? It's compute plus ontology, basically. And that can change.
So the way Alex Karp's talking right here, right, in talking bigger picture about Western democracy and our way of life is better, right? I think it's important everybody understands that is going to resonate heavy with a lot of folks out there, right? But on the flip side, if you wonder why many times Palantir's growth rates might be lower in Europe than they should be, honestly, because those growth rates should be actually far better than the U.S., to be quite frank, because the U.S. is just a more built market for Palantir than Europe, right? But in Europe, some people don't like that talk. Some people, they feel like it's a little too, comes across as too rough. They feel like, it's too strongly worded. They don't feel comfortable with taking that as aggressive of a stance, right? And so when Alex Karp talks like that, if it's a European CEO, they might be more turned off, right? If it's an American CEO, they might be more turned on by that, right? And it could also vary depending upon political views as well, right? If you're on one side versus the other side. So, these are just all things to keep in mind, but it makes me think of one of the customers that presented. If I recall, that company was called Northwind, right? And it was this company that's using Palantir pretty heavily to help out their business. And if I recall, the gentleman was located in the Midwest, somewhere in the rural Midwest, and he specifically cited one of the three core reasons why using Palantir. One of the three core reasons was a strange one, in my opinion, but it made sense, and it was, Palantir's core values align with ours. And so when you talk about core values aligning with another company, are we talking about exactly what Alex Karp is, going on there, right? In talking about, this way of life being better and those sorts of things. And so, I appreciate definitely the approach of Karp there in terms of just, say it with your chest. I appreciate that overall, right? So anyways, I think that's important just to cover, because not everybody's going to like what Karp just said. It is important we all understand that. But some people are going to absolutely love what he just said right there in that last, I would say, 60 seconds.
The very structure of our culture, from manufacturing to weapon systems to how we organize things to our healthcare distribution, can have a completely different way and better way of living.
Let me ask you this. You're talking about AI, and we're talking about the benefits, the advantages, the use cases. I am also interested, Alex, to get your take on when you think about the risks of this technology. Let me put one forward. We have an election coming. How concerned are you, as an American executive, but also just an American citizen, about the very adversaries we're talking about here deploying AI for nefarious purposes, ramping that to sow confusion and division?
Yeah, and there's only one way to fight a deadly adversary.
What is that?
Yeah, with a deadly set of weapons. So like if you want to fight our adversaries, and by the way, my version of fighting is you're so strong, you're so willing to fight, they don't fight you. So it's like, I recently have gotten in trouble for saying, I'm a peace activist. I am a peace activist. I'm a peace activist because I want enormous growth in America, and I want...
Reminds me of the scene in Iron Man where he talks about, Iron Man's talking about, Robert Downey Jr. is talking about, my dad, the one that had originally built the Stark Enterprises or whatever in the movie, right? My dad believed in whoever had the biggest stick won, right? And so, the best defense could be potentially a strong offense, right? And so just another way of looking at it.
Really deadly weapon systems. You want peace in the world? You have a lot of growth in America and you have really deadly weapon systems, and you tell your adversaries, you know what, I just might use them. I'm not even going to explain why I'll use them. You start acting up, I will use them. You don't act up,
Peace through strength.
Peace through strength and a little bit of unpredictability. We are in a world where our adversaries are founders. They have the founder playbook, which is I'm gonna be aggressive and win where I can. We have a playbook written probably at Harvard and Yale and Stanford, institutions which are now symptomatic with not producing structures where they don't see discrimination when it's in front of you, producing structures and ideologies that are literally built for the decline of our country. We need to get out of the business of we're declining, we're apologizing, we're not going to use force. We need to, and the peace activists are actually us. And the people who claim to be peace activists are actually sowing destruction, disorder, discrimination. It's an exact inversion of what they claim to be. But those of us on our side who are pro-growth, pro-America, pro our economy transfers, and pro having the best systems in the world, we need to organize, build things, and then we also need to have exact understanding of what works, what doesn't, and implement it very quickly.
I mentioned the election. I want to stick with that real quickly. Does it matter to Palantir who wins, Biden or Trump? Does that impact any potential business you're going to have with the U.S. government?
Look, we've been in business for 20 years. I have not seen an impact on our business, depending who's president.
And if not, I am interested.
I love that. Great response there. Yeah, 100%. Let's see. Palantir went through Bush, and they went through Obama. Then they went through, obviously, T-Man and now B-Man, right? So, yeah, 100%. Great response by him right there.
Talk about these conflicts around the world right now, running hot. Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas. Has that changed how the DOD...
See, that's where Alex Karp draws a line. He'll give you a whole backstory and you know why he wants the U.S. to win and failing institutions and thought processes and things like that. But I've never really heard Alex Karp go, on a rant on why, this guy should be the next president or this guy. So that's where he stops. And so I actually appreciate that overall, right? So
it's about spending, Alex, and what they want to spend on.
The DOD is changing rapidly how it spends.
How so?
Well, there's much more of a focus. You saw that we won this big Maven contract. These things are a natural outgrowth of we need to fight better, we need to fight quicker, we need to fight on the terms where America has superiority. Of course we can move quicker. Of course the DOD wants to move quicker. Our society wants to move quicker. I think, unfortunately, we are going to end up moving even quicker because our adversaries are likely to continue their nefarious acts.
Which adversary? Russia, China, Iran?
I mean, all three are working together. One of the things I travel around the world, and basically wherever you go, people are like, "Well, I want you to be strong on this one and appease the other." People who believe in appeasement, whether it's Iran, China, Russia, pick your favorite, the one you're sympathetic with, they don't understand. We have adversaries there working together. Despite problems you may have, some people don't like the war in Ukraine, some people don't like Israel, some people want an appeasement strategy with China. It doesn't work. They are working together against us, and we have to work together against them.
Last question. You mentioned Maven. I want to dig in. The DOD recently disclosing this was a 5-year, $480 million contract with Palantir. Just walk us through, what is that contract? What is it? What does it mean for your company?
I never know what we're allowed to say about these very sensitive contracts, but I'll tell you what it means for the nation. This country is focused on using AI to have a structural advantage in how we deploy and understand the battlefield, deploy our assets and understand the battlefield. And Palantir plays a crucial role in that arena. We're going to continue to play a crucial role in that arena. And by the way, we're making it possible through our software to allow other software and hardware companies to work off of our platform. So this is not just a win for Palantir, though it is, and I'm very proud of it. This is a win, quite frankly, for the tech ecosystem that powers this nation.
How big is that ecosystem now? Which has grown a lot since we first started talking.
Look, the venture capital world has completely flipped. When we talked the last time, by and large, the tech community was adversarial to Palantir on this issue of supporting our nation. Now, I think the tech community is the most supportive part of our economy in protecting our nation.
Why did that flip, by the way?
Hey, if they stopped hating the player or the game.
Alex Karp, I know you are very busy today. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
So one of the really exciting things about Palantir is that government business looks like it's really starting to turn a corner here. The government business has been kind of a lagging business in the recent year, if not, many quarters, let's just call it that. And the commercial growth has been really strong, really exciting, but the government numbers have been kind of lame, kind of disappointing, but it seems like things are really taking a turn for the better. And that's going to definitely help out Palantir's likely overall growth rates in the back half of this year and as we go into 2025, which is very exciting overall. And obviously the commercial demand we know is insanely high, right? So that's very, very exciting. All right, so time to get in Tom Lee. By the way, in regards to Palantir, if you're looking to apply to join a private group and get access to our Discord chat, our Palantir community, we got one of the best Palantir communities in the world. In that Discord chat, got so many Palantir shareholders. We're always talking about the stock, always talking about, all the breaking news in regards to it and whatnot. So if you're looking to apply to join in there, click the pinned comment. You can apply to join in there. You also get access to all my course curriculums as being part of that, and obviously access to all the other Discord chats, categories that we have in there around stocks, right? All right, so Fundstrat, Tom Lee, let's get into hear what he has to say.
Kind of a big week when we look at CPI and the Fed decision, but I want to focus on today first. What's your WEX word of the day? How do you see today shaping up?
Well, the WEX word of the day is visibility, because that's what's getting investors anxious about the next couple of days until we hear from the Fed and CPI. I think investors are anxious and they want visibility.
All right, so looking for some visibility. We got some visibility yesterday from Apple. We've been waiting for WWDC and their big artificial intelligence unveil. Stock closed down 2%. I want to get your take on what you heard and what you saw and what you think about.
Ooh, that should be interesting. So just today in the Palantir chat, folks were talking about, just curious if this is where to find out top 100 Palantir clients, if so, how. And one of our members posted this here, list of Palantir Foundry customers, right? And so this is just all the great stuff we have going on in the private group that I don't think a lot of people know about. That's just very, very helpful, being around like-minded people that are there to help, share ideas, perspectives, opinions, links, resources that people wouldn't even know about, something like that, right? So just phenomenal stuff.
Stock.
Well, Apple is one of our granny shots. It's a stock that we think investors need to really hold for the long term. The company has always been at the center of everything that's happening around a consumer and new technologies. So to me, there might have been some head scratching because these features may not be part of someone's life just yet. But as you know, Apple gets a lot of these things right.
All right. So by the way, for the audience, your granny shot, it's kind of like almost a very easy shot. You think it's almost a no-brainer when it comes to that stock, right?
That's right. I think investors should look at it as a core portfolio holding. The granny shots is basically a thematic portfolio that buys the strongest stocks in a specific theme. So when you think of AI and millennials, Apple and NVIDIA and Tesla, they're really at the center of that.
All right. But your sector picks when it comes to the AI trade are NVIDIA, Cadence, ARM, AMD. Why isn't Apple in there if you believe that it's a core holding and obviously they're pushing into the AI space?
I can't agree that Apple's, an AI play. I just can't agree with that at all. It doesn't mean they can't become an AI play. Maybe they can over the next, several years, and then they'll be a respected AI play. But I think to assume Apple's an AI play is a little utterly ridiculous. They haven't shown anything yet that makes you say, yes, Apple's a great AI play. You look at what Palantir has, you look at what NVIDIA is doing, you look at what Tesla's doing with self-driving. These are companies that have proven they have AI products. You look at obviously what Meta's doing, right? Whether we're talking about through the Llama model or whether we're talking about them integrating AI into their content feeds and whatnot. You look at those companies and it's clear like, oh, wow, these are like direct AI plays. Apple has not shown that. They have not shown that yet. It doesn't mean they can't. I use Apple devices every day. Okay, so MacBooks, iPads, iPhones, everything. Apple has not shown me one inkling of being an AI play yet. Once again, they could become that, but there's a big difference between thinking something might become something and like there's some proof to get to that place. Apple has shown zero proof so far that they're getting to that place. As an Apple customer.
Mainly because Apple is much more than just an AI company. So I don't think it's intentional that we left out Apple when we talk about AI trades, but when our clients are looking for direct beta exposure, to them, the complex is NVIDIA and then stocks with high correlations to NVIDIA, which are the ones that we actually listed.
All right. So, Tom, know what you're intentional about? Small caps. You've been one of the biggest bulls when it comes to small caps, specifically the IWM ETF. I'm just looking at the small caps since the last Fed decision. They're up 3%. The rest of the market's up about 6.5%. They've been lagging all year long. Is there still a case for small caps to rally as much as 50% this year in your mind?
Come on, Tom.
Oh, yeah, definitely. One thing investors have to keep in mind is small caps get hampered when investors worry about lack of visibility. When the Fed begins to cut and we actually have shown this to our clients, and the number of expected cuts begins to creep up, that has been correlated with the IWM outperforming the broader market. So the reality is the stock market is saying, look, I don't want to touch small caps until the Fed starts cutting. But in the meantime, small caps have better earnings growth, close to 19% in the Russell 2000 versus around 9% for the S&P. And the median PE multiple is actually around 10 times in the Russell 2000 compared to 16 times for the S&P. So better growth, lower multiples. I think it's a great risk reward for investors right now.
But aren't they also more rate sensitive and also more sensitive to the higher cost of capital and the higher for longer environment? I mean, you keep saying that investors don't want to touch them until the Fed starts cutting. We don't have any clarity. We might get some answers tomorrow, but it's unlikely. The Fed's been very clear. They're data dependent.
Sure. But I think what you've just described, which is higher cost of money, or a high bar for borrowing money, that's the existing conditions. So when the Fed starts cutting, that starts to ease. What would investors benefit from is having exposure to things that are levered to an easing of financial conditions. That would actually argue for small caps. So it's a bit of a waiting game, but boy, I don't know anyone who's made money trying to trade this week to week. Any great ideas? All the great ideas take time to work.
Wow.
It's interesting, the biggest weightings. Hold on, let me have Tom finish here, and then we'll talk about the biggest weightings of the Russell 2000.
Is there any part of the small caps that you think are better than others? All small caps aren't created equal.
Well, one thing I think investors have to keep in mind is that they might think a small cap is like a weak company, but actually small caps, especially in the Russell 2000, tend to be very strong companies that dominate a smaller market. So that's why, they're not $1 trillion company, but they may be number one.
That's a fair argument Tom makes there, right? Once again, if you're looking to apply to join a private group, there'll be pinned comment down there today. So Russell 2000 weighting here. So it's interesting. I was looking at that. And the biggest Russell 2000 weighting is super microcomputer. So that's SMCI. That's been obviously a very hot stock. There's probably, some people refer to it as mini NVIDIA, right? So obviously that's a high risk, high reward type stock there. So that's interesting that it's the biggest weighting. Second biggest weighting, also very high risk, very high reward stock, MicroStrategy. That's basically just a leveraged play on Bitcoin. Okay. Wow. Third biggest weighting for the Russell, Carvana. Carvana? Whew. All those top three are very high risk, very high reward. Like if I think about the type of stocks that could double over the next year, but could also go down 50% over the next year, it's all three of those stocks. Carvana, MicroStrategy, super microcomputer. Those are the type of stocks that literally it's like a 2x over the next year or down 50%. Like those are both realistic possibilities, right? Then there's a company called Comfort Systems. Don't know much about that one. Cord Energy, an energy company. On to innovation. And then the seventh biggest holding is, guess what? Elf on a Shelf. Elf on a Shelf. So obviously we know Elf's great, but also that's a higher valuation name. So that's the thing with the Russell. You kind of look at some of those biggest weightings and it kind of seems, sometimes a little, it's very high risk, very high reward, right? But keep in mind the weightings for those Russell stocks, those top dogs, much smaller than like if you look at the Q's weightings at the top dogs or the S&P 500 or something like that. So one stock going up a bunch or down a bunch, it doesn't affect it as much as if one of the big top dogs in the S&P 500 or Q's are going up or down a lot. Okay, so something to keep in mind there. Appreciate y'all joining me. Thanks so much for being here, folks. Much love and have a great day.